Hawkeyes take on the Fighting Illini of Illinois on Saturday in what I'm calling a must-win. Illinois coming off an impressive victory, which in the end prompted a firing of Wisconsin head coach Paul Chryst. Can the Illini keep it going? We'll talk about it in just a moment. But first, I want to talk to you about Under the Kitchen. Randy Engel and his tremendous Hawkeye prints. He's got deals with a number of athletes, former players, current players, and I think some future players in the works right now. Check his stuff out. Maybe buy a print or two, or maybe a whole pile of prints for your favorite Hawkeye friends. Visit Under the Kitchen on Facebook for more details. And Ascent Nutrition, check out all of their products, the least of which being their Ascent Coffee. It's great stuff, folks. It will get you ready for your day, and it will not pollute your body. Visit goascentnutrition.com. Use the code Hawkeyes for 15% off your order. And you're supporting the channel when you support all of our sponsors here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. So the Hawkeyes coming off the 27-14 loss to Michigan, and boy, we thought this was one of Iowa's more winnable games heading into the year, and now it's looking like a game in which Iowa not only would I consider to be a must-win, but a game in which Iowa is not expected to win. The line is now, I believe, moved to 4. It opened at 3, which would basically be a pick'em with Illinois being the home team. It'll be interesting to see how many fans they can pack into that stadium in Champaign. Last I heard, I think it was on Tuesday morning, there were still like 20,000 seats available. But folks, there are organizations and certainly university, they're going out of their way to try to get people to nab tickets. They don't have a real supportive fan base for this program right now. And when I say supportive, I'm talking about season ticket holders. So it's hard to pack how many tens of thousands of single game ticket holders here for this game on Saturday, and to do so in less than 1 week. Because really, Illinois had played a fairly weak schedule prior to the Wisconsin victory. They'd beaten Virginia, Chattanooga, they'd lost to Indiana, and they beat Wyoming. And I understand this Wisconsin team is probably not the team we're accustomed to seeing. They also got trounced, Wisconsin did, against Ohio State, but it is Ohio State. This is still a really good Wisconsin defense. I have faith in that, in what Jim Leonard does, and I think that defense is probably going to keep them in a lot of games, even without Paul Chryst at the helm. The thing about Illinois, what they're doing right now is they've built this in the trenches. Defensively, this is as good of a defense as you may have in the Big Ten, and that might not be hyperbole. Now, again, they haven't played the toughest of schedules, but we do have a fairly big sample size. All right, this team now is 4-1 with wins against Wisconsin, Virginia, and of course the loss to Indiana. That was a game they should have won. They dominated the numbers in that game. I want to run through a few stats from a couple of these games. First of all, let's look at that Indiana-Illinois game. Of course, the Hoosiers winning that game in Bloomington 23-20. But Illinois held Indiana to 32 rushing yards. Now, to put that in perspective, Illinois, again on the road against a Big Ten opponent, had 216 yards on the road, and they lost. They literally outrushed Indiana by nearly 200 yards and still lost the game. That is just never going to happen unless you turn the ball over a bunch, and that's exactly what Illinois did. 4 turnovers for the Illini, and they found a way to lose that game. But again, held Indiana to 32 on the ground. Now, Wyoming, not the team they have been. They had some offseason and off-field issues, some coaching issues. They had a lot of players going to the transfer portal during this past cycle. However, the Utah State transfer, Peasley at quarterback for Wyoming, listen to his final numbers against the Illini. He went 5 for 20 for 30 yards through the air. 5 for 20 for 30 yards, an average of 1.5 per attempt. Yikes. That's what Illinois secondary is capable of doing. Again, I understand that Wyoming is not murderer's row. I understand that. But when you're dominating teams like that, I don't care who you're playing in the FBS, that's impressive. Virginia. Illinois held Virginia to 42 rushing yards for the game. They outrushed Virginia 198-42, and they dominate that game 24-3. They also beat a solid Chattanooga FCS program 31-0. And speaking of holding quarterbacks down, Chattanooga's quarterback, their starting quarterback, went 6 for 18 for 49 yards and 2 picks, an average of 2.7 per attempt. And how about maybe the most impressive stat of them all? They go on the road to Madison and win 34-10, holding the Badgers to 2 rushing yards. And this was not a fluke. 2 rushing yards. Braylon Allen had a miserable game. Again, this is in Madison. How often do teams go up to Madison and win? I know Wazoo did it earlier this year, and I know Wisconsin has taken a step back. But anybody who says that, there have been nobody in the world that could have predicted that Illinois could have outrushed Wisconsin 137-2, and I believe Braylon Allen is healthy. I don't think this had anything to do with any issues with Braylon Allen as far as health is concerned. This is just a really good Illinois defense. But notice that, it's some weeks that they're dominating in the run game, and there's some weeks when they're dominating in pass defense. Now, they run the ball effectively each and every week. You look at Chase Brown, he's averaging almost 150 yards per game. He's got 733 rushing yards for the year, which is not even, Iowa as a team isn't even close to that. I think Iowa's maybe slightly over 500 rushing yards as a team so far this year. So, there's a reason why Illinois, just in total defense right now, is the 3rd ranked team in all of the FBS behind only James Madison and Minnesota. All right, there's a reason for that. And then we're talking total defense. So that, of course, includes yards only. Now, if you look at points allowed for the year, Illinois is the number 1 scoring defense in the country. Yes, they're better than Iowa in both total defense and scoring defense. I may say, well, Corey, Illinois hasn't played the schedule that Iowa has played. Okay, all right. Yeah, you're right. Illinois hasn't played a Michigan. But heading into the year, a road trip to Bloomington, a road trip to Wisconsin, does that outweigh a home game against Iowa State and a home game against Michigan? I think it does. And yes, Iowa did play that 3rd Power 5 opponent in Rutgers. But boy, this is a good defense. And it's no surprise with Brett Bielema and what look at what he built that Wisconsin program on 10 years ago. It was about defense. It was about winning in the trenches. He's got them rolling. Chase Brown is a really good back, if you didn't realize it by now. Let's also remember that Iowa struggled in 2020 against the Illini before a big second half from Iowa, and the offense, including Spencer Petras, played a really nice second half in 2020 during that COVID-reduced year. And in 2021, Iowa was down by double figures in that game until Charlie Jones popped off a big kickoff return for a touchdown, which shifted the tide. This is going to be a game where I'm telling you, folks, if Iowa loses this game, it's going to get ugly. You fall to 3-3 with games against Ohio State on tap. They've still got Minnesota on tap, Purdue on the road. This is a must win if we're talking about salvaging this year. Okay. And that's what I know people think I'm overreacting. They're 3-2, folks. And I would venture to say those first 4 games, 3 of those first 4 were absolutely the most winnable games on the schedule. And Iowa State, we perceived that game to be, a home game to be a game that Iowa should have won. And, of course, they did not. So this is a situation where you got to win this football game. And if I'm talking about a key to the game, I'm looking at Iowa's ability to rush the football. Illinois is going to rush the ball well. Again, I mentioned against Wisconsin's defense, which typically is elite. Listen, Wisconsin's had their struggles. That's still a pretty good defense. Illinois put up 34 points against the Badgers. They rushed for 137 yards. Not a huge output, but respectable, especially when you're winning that 137-2. I mentioned Chattanooga. They actually rushed the ball somewhat effectively against the Illini, but they only finished with 93 yards after you factor in sack yardage. Virginia rushed the ball for just 42 yards. Wyoming rushed the ball after sack yardage for 182 yards. So Wyoming actually was able to run the football, but they were playing from behind the whole game. And again, we know Illinois shut down their passing game. And I mentioned Indiana as well, the 32 yards on the ground. The numbers would say, and you can talk to Don Patterson about this, Coach Don Patterson, who we have on our postgame show each and every week. The numbers, the analytics actually say it's more important to win in rushing. In other words, people like to say, well, what's the magic number? Do you have to hit 100 yards? Do you have to hit 150 yards to win a Big Ten football game? The numbers actually say, the data says that it's more important to actually win in that category. So let's weigh Iowa's ability to stop the run and Iowa's ability to run versus Illinois' ability to stop the run and Illinois' ability to run. Right now, there's no question Illinois' run game is clicking, and they've got a more experienced, I think, dynamic back than anything Iowa has. I like Caleb Johnson. I like LaShawn Williams. but Chase Brown is by far the more proven backs. And right now, I think you'd say it's a toss-up between which rushing defense is better. If you look at the numbers, just rushing defense right now, Illinois, of course, near the top, number 3 in the country, averaging or allowing on average just 70.2 yards per game on the ground. Iowa is good, but 13 in the country at 92.8. So that would tell me that Illinois is going to win the rushing battle. I'm not going to say right now whether I'm picking the Illini to win the game. I'll save that for my pick'em segment here coming up later this week. But boy, who wins that rushing battle? That will be key. And if they can pack that stadium and make it difficult, boy, I tell you, I love seeing Rutgers packed. I love seeing Illinois packed, but this is going to be a tougher game than the Rutgers game, mark my words. Appreciate you tuning in for another segment of the show. A reminder that this game is on Saturday, 6:30 p.m. Central Time on BTN. I'll be releasing my pick'em segment for the week of college football here within the next 24 hours. After the game Saturday, it's Iowa postgame with myself and Coach Don Patterson, as we'll be recapping the Hawks and the Illini.